I'm going to be talking today about two courses that I teach and my trials and tribulations with teaching with technology. I call this technology-enhanced teaching, and although my name appears at the bottom of the screen, I want to point out that there is a very extensive cast of, should I say, distributed characters. Most importantly, my colleague Michael Gonzalez over here has been my partner in this for 2 years now, and we've done a number of really innovative things, including, as you see here in front of you, a live IP video conferencing connection with the State University New York at Buffalo, which we'll turn to in a little bit. Let me begin by articulating a few of the reasons, some of the beliefs and principles that stand behind the kind of teaching initiatives that I've been involved with, that the beliefs and principles which I think lead me to want to introduce technology into the teaching environment. The first of these beliefs is one that I really acquired here at Stanford by listening to Ramon Saldivar in his efforts to revamp the introduction to the humanities, and when I was, should I say, dragooned, enrolled, enlisted into teaching a course in the introduction to the humanities called The Word in the World, which was a fabulous experience for me. One of the guiding principles that we adopted in that program, and which has been my sort of mantra ever since, is that students should become co-producers of their learning experience. And I really mean that seriously. In this Word in the World course, which you see some screenshot here, we involve students on a day-to-day basis in ramping up our lectures for the course, not only just in sort of delivering lectures which we organized as a team teaching effort, but actually involve the students here. You see a kind of preparatory session involving students, and one of the fellows, teaching fellows in that program at the time, Carlos Celigo, who has subsequently become the ATS person, academic technology specialist, one of them for the freshman and sophomore programs. Another of our guiding principles in this project, and which is informs the things that I'll show you in a few minutes, is the notion that all of us learn best when we have a personal stake, not only in the process, a process that involves us, but in the outcome, in the product, and trying to involve students in this, in the process, and adapting our teaching to the stakes that students have in the content of the subject matter, creating opportunities for students to modify the content to address things that come up as the course proceeds, not treating the course as a sort of predefined template that we just roll out and it just goes on from one day to the next, but actually adapt it to the needs and interests of the students who evolve stakes in the course as the quarter or as the semester, whichever it happens to be, progresses. And one of the kinds of things that's crucial in my notion of this is to create opportunities and ways of involving students and collaborating and shaping the class agenda, even a class day-to-day agenda in the course of the course. Just to give you an example of the way that sort of thing worked in our course, The Word in the World. You'll be seeing, in fact, this young student here is sitting on our web forum at the moment when this photograph was taken. And the way that worked, we have a forum that is ongoing with respect to various topics that are raised in questions that we address around the readings and so forth in a very structured fashion. And students, before the lecture actually takes place, the students are themselves encouraged to post their ideas and thoughts about what's going on in these readings. I happen to be an insomniac, and so don't mind staying up all night watching these students post their postings, and frequently what would happen is that the lecture would be framed by student comments taken from the forum and brought in, so that the students actually participated in setting the agenda, not only just for a discussion section, but for the actual lecture that was taking place on a given day. And I believe and we'll see in the course that I'll show you in a few minutes, a course called Bodyworks, where we've actually adapted the website in ways in order to allow on-the-fly students to introduce completely new materials, add new content to the course as we go along. And then a third idea that motivates my thinking about why it's important to use technology and why technology is advantageous to address the issues of teaching at the moment is that with the web, with the introduction of computing in so many different aspects of our life, it seems to me that intellectual work and knowledge production just simply have become a collective enterprise. The idea of the humanist scholar sitting alone someplace in a garret, working away in isolation, is completely unrealistic, it seems to me, and we should adapt our teaching to the realities of contemporary scholarship. Most students, when they leave this environment, will go off to jobs where they work in groups, where they work in collectives. And we should address that issue in our teaching by recognizing that education and knowledge production are collective enterprises. So the way that we introduce that into our courses, the way that you'll see it introduced into a course I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes, is that there isn't a final exam at the end of the course where the students are examined over their how well they've are able to regurgitate the text that they've just been reading for a quarter. What we do is we establish teams of students working together in groups, and they produce collaborative projects and of varying types. In this Introduction to Humanities, many of the students produced websites. They're actually a whole lot better at this than I am. But some produced films, others produced puppet shows, and a variety of other kinds of work that were all addressing this issue of group activity in the production of knowledge. Now, I think that it's important to use technology in our environment today, and as you can see, I'm kind of an enthusiast. But I think that we can use technology effectively to do the things that I list here. First of all, to encourage individual participation. We all know that there are a number of students who just sit at the back of the room, don't participate very actively in the ongoing discussion of the class, but yet are very engaged in the material. Frequently, these students can be really brought out in their contributions, added to the ongoing dialogue of the course through a forum, through the forum which I'll show you that we use. Another use of, and I think that my primary use of technology, I'm really interested in distance learning, as you'll see, but I'm not interested in distance learning in terms of the large broadcast model where I am sitting here at my desk at Stanford and broadcasting a course to hundreds of people who just are watching it over television or something of that sort, or over the internet as we are now. But I'm really interested in looking at how these technologies can be used to facilitate small group interaction. And I mean groups of seminar size, and that's what I'll be showing you in a few seconds. Our courses, two different groups that are research seminars, one of which is a course that's on science and technology in the Silicon Valley, and it's got the subtitle East Meets West because it's taught simultaneously at Georgia Tech with a group of 15 students there, and here at Stanford with a group of about 15 students here. And we engage one another in a weekly internet video conference. There are a number of other ways that I envision using this technology for small group interaction. I would love to use, as soon as they get the kind of things that you can plug a card into your laptop, like this one, the sort of thing that Michael's doing over here with the computer. We're going to be able to do it on our laptops, take it with us, have office hours on the fly with people beaming in from a lot of different places. I really welcome that. I think it's a great opportunity for dialogue. I think that it's important to use this technology to extend the dialogue of the course beyond the classroom. Not that it just take place in the classroom. I think, if I might say, one of the major drawbacks of the courses that I've constructed is that it turns students into people somewhat like me, insomniacs, because you end up getting so engaged in this material and you're involved in this ongoing forum that runs on all night long that the course kind of takes over your life. And so there's a kind of certain resistance to some of this, but it's futile. Then the one other thing I'm going to show at the end here is my interest not only in using these technologies for communication, but I want to, as we're increasing the numbers of materials, I'll show you a course. One of my courses has 1,500 documents in it at the moment on Silicon Valley. And this is a huge amount of material, and one of the kinds of, and we have a lot of video. You'll see various kinds of streaming video. And I've been, over the years, very engaged in developing tools for allowing students to research this material, to extract the bits of it that they need to go deep down into some set of texts or individual texts and extract that piece of material that they need. And I'll be showing you a tool that is a commercial tool now called Semio, which the Highwire Press here at Stanford is using to build into its knowledge environments and into the various kinds of digital libraries that they're constructing in the science domain. But I use it in the humanities. So now one of the things that I want to talk about I'll focus on the tools. You'll see a lot of stuff as we go along that you may have questions about, texts that have been scanned, movies that are online, and believe me, it's all legal. And but I'm going to focus on these tools that I've been quite active in using to enhance the communication among students, their participation in the course. And the first of these is a tool that I've just come to love dearly, Panphora. This is the Stanford Learning Lab's web-based forum. I use this. You'll see we're going to be doing internet video conferencing. Let me just say that video conferencing by itself is nothing new, right? It's been around forever. It seems like ever since I can have been in a university, there have been video conferences. Mostly it was lawyers and doctors, medical school people that could afford video conferencing. It's come down even in price to be somewhat affordable. But the interesting thing about the video conferencing that we're using is, first of all, it's on the internet. And if you have the right connections, it's basically there for free. It's also extremely adaptable to be able to be used ported into a room just like this. And as the technology improves in the next year or so, we'll be able to do this on our own without relying so heavily as I do. If Michael Gonzalez divorced me, I would really be in a lot of trouble right now. But in the future, it may not be so we may not be so completely dependent on this kind of extended group of distributed colleagues. And as I say, I'll talk to you about Simio, which is a knowledge extraction tool. So let me go first before turning to SUNY Buffalo. I want to show you this course that that is going on now on Silicon Valley. You can't hear it. That's all right. So this is the course. There's a syllabus, as you see, with our various readings. This is what we are doing this week. And if you want to do the readings, you have to have an IP. You have to have a password and so forth. Just want to make sure you see that, particularly if you're watching on television and you're a lawyer. The course involves these people, a group of Georgia Tech students. Most of them are engineers, and some of them, most of them are at Georgia Tech are graduate students. One of the kinds of things that we're trying to do is to facilitate the interaction of these two groups, not only by using our internet video conference. We use this we have a Tuesday 2-hour video conference, but what we're also doing is using this, as I say, to facilitate face-to-face contact. So in order to really facilitate that, we have students in both places collaborating with one another, doing group projects. Students at Georgia Tech are working with Stanford students. 2 Stanford students, for example, tomorrow are flying out to Georgia Tech to work with one of their colleagues there on CNN, the development of CNN's web presence and the way in which that web presence has affected the way CNN does the news. That's a kind of project that brings together students from both places. Also this week, one of the Georgia Tech students that I just showed you, Chris McGahee, will be flying into Stanford to work on the Stanford Terman papers, Frederick Terman papers. And these other individuals that you see there are faculty who are involved in the course and who beam in from time to time from distant locations. So I want to go to our web forum and show you the way we use this, which I think is really interesting. So for example, last week, the way that we organize the forum is that students, students collaborate. 1 or 2 students from Georgia Tech with 1 or 2 students from Stanford collaborate on discussing with one another on the forum exactly what it is that they think these readings that we're looking at are about, and which is the key points that they want to see discussed in this valuable 2-hour period that we have with one another. And they use this to ramp up the discussion. Chris was one of the discussant leaders for that. And you can see that other students get involved, a whole group of students get involved in saying, well, yeah, I think that's important, but I'd really like us to see something else go on in this discussion as well. So we use the forum as a way, before we get to class, to begin discussing our readings, to call out those key points that we think are the really valuable things we should be discussing with one another in class. And then the discussant leaders, these 4 students, then launch us into our discussion in our video conference. On this particular day, one of the things that we did was to one of our readings were about Douglas Engelbart and his development in the 1960s here at Stanford Research Institute of the mouse, hypertext, online collaboration, a whole bunch of things. And as things would have it, Engelbart himself came to the class and joined into the discussion. And it was really quite an event for most of the students. And he talked about, well, what would you do with this sort of thing today after the web? And he puts up several web discussion things that are related to his own work presently. So that's a kind of way in which we use the forum as a way to engage students in the material before the class actually happens, and then a lot of things happen around that. Now I want to, at this point, since we're talking so much about, I'll get back to this kind of thing. We have, this is just a sample of many of the videos that we have. We have all kinds of, my favorite is one that the Stanford Channel did, called Dave and Jerry's Excellent Venture, Yahoo. So what I think we'll do at this point is to show another use that we make of this technology by hooking into SUNY Buffalo and my colleague there, who you now see on screen. This is Professor Bernadette Wagenstein, who is a student of comparative literature and performance art at SUNY Buffalo. She has her PhD from the University of Vienna in Austria, and she worked with Umberto Eco. Just imagine that somebody like that is working with us here at Stanford in a course which he'll describe called Bodyworks. Hi, Bernadette.
Okay, can you hear and see me?
Yes, beautifully.
Yes, okay. Well, hi, Stanford. I do hear my echo pretty strongly, but I think I can live with that. I'm glad we have been able to set things up here from our side in order to show you what we've been actually doing with the IP video conferencing during last semester team-taught course of Bodyworks with Tim in Stanford. Well, the first thing I want to tell you is, as Tim has already said, I'm a humanities person. I'm actually a linguist and a semiotician. I'm very much interested in technology, but I'm really not a technician at all.
So she's showing a course that we taught together called Bodyworks. It's a course that involves our experience of biomedical technology since, here she is.
Were you able to hear me, Tim?
Now we can, yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So do I need to repeat what I said before?
I think go ahead.
Okay. This has been a very interdisciplinary idea of Tim, of course, who's an historian of science, and who has been working together with people from the humanities and doctors, of course, in order to examine these new ways that the current cultural imaginary is actually thinking about bodies and about how we can actually intervene and change these bodies in a so-called cyber culture. And of course, given this topic, there was really no better way than the IP video conference in order to examine these themes. And let me show you here what we have done actually. For example, here this was the first session called Machines and Bodies in the 20th Century. And the website, of course, can be accessed both from Stanford, and it can be accessed anywhere, but both my students and the Stanford students have been using this website together and have been reading the assigned readings. And it's a very elaborate website, really, because it also consists of this site suggested readings that were, as it says, not obligatory, but in which we were able to really locate a lot of additional material. And for example, what was really fascinating with this course is that the Stanford team, and I, of course, am very thankful really to their work, because they were actually the ones who had digitalized 70 streamed video clips. And let me just show you this one here. It's actually mute, and I hope you can still see me. And in the background, we'll have Arnold Schwarzenegger, my compatriot, who is actually who is involved in some sort of a cyborg action in which he's going to use his arm here that is very fast, going to be transformed in something else. Anyway, so these were just, this is just one example of 70 examples that we've been using during this course of digitalized videos that were pertinent to the topics of the imagination of the body at the turn of the 20th century, late 20th century, and the background of the medical technology that actually formates these new cultural imaginaries. But then, for example, this is another course. It is called Spare Parts, Another Session, in which, again, we have readings, suggested readings. Then this one was a very interesting session in which Tim has been working together with the Stanford medical team in order to show the latest ways of computer-assisted surgery, telesurgery. And I think one of the highlights, really, of our course was when we were even able to beam in a third participant to our course, which was W.J.T. Mitchell. And he actually gave a talk through IP video conferencing from the third site. And what we were able was actually to listen to his talk, and then we had interventions both from Stanford from Stanford students and from my students here, and it really worked very well. So of course this opens a whole new possibility of not having to fly people in or out, but of just beaming them in to a particular session in which they would have something interesting to say and to discuss about. So, of course, one of the most, a very good example, I guess, of a session, and these are all the special effects that Tim and his team have been putting up on the web with all these audio and other effects. And here, for example, we were able to view a real would say a very big portion of the film, The Matrix, and then talk about how The Matrix actually deconstructs the idea of reality and virtuality. And so these are just some of the examples that I wanted to tell you about from the content here that we were dealing about. And of course the content involving precisely matters of whether new bodies that are dealt with in cyberspace actually call for new agencies, define what it is actually to have a subjectivity in new ways, and so forth. So in that sense, the IP video conferencing, as I said before, was really the ideal forum under which we could have designed this course. And let me also tell you something from my perspective, how I felt and how my students actually felt about this. As Tim, I think, very elegantly puts it, as he said, the students as the co-producers of a learning environment in which he practically deconstructs the barriers or frontiers of teaching and learning. And this is precisely, I must say, what happened, because such a web space gives us new room in which students can actually put their works in progress so that we, teachers or professors, can access these spaces. But it all becomes really a new merged, I would say, interface of teaching in which I'm sure Tim is right, there is really a new agency going on even from the part of the students themselves. And my students here in Buffalo were extremely happy with the interaction. It took a while, I must admit, because of course in the beginning, if you have a couple of students who have to talk into microphones, they have to get used to that. But after, I think, the first transmission or so, they were really looking forward to meeting the people at Stanford. There were always some, of course, questions about the weather differences between Buffalo and Stanford and things like that. So it was also a very nice way of, of having little conversations, but then also of really going into detail about of the course issues. And beyond the times that we were actually video conferencing, we were using the forum that Tim showed you with another university that he is, Georgia Tech, that he's been working with. But we had exactly the same forum, and students really could interact beyond the time frame of these meetings. And this was really to create a complete a community between these young people who are interested in the medializations of the body at the turn of the millennium. So I don't know if there are any questions from your part, or...
Is that Alexander I hear?
Yes, I know. I'm sorry. You are hearing, Alexander. It was really such a disaster. I can't tell you. I mean, it's extremely cold here, and I didn't really know how this is all going to work out. And so a very good friend of mine came in with me, and she is right now playing with him here. But he's extremely excited to see me talk like that. So he would like to participate. If you want, you can see him. We can bring him over. So this could be a very special effect.
Well,
Alexander, schau mal.
Schau mal.
Ja, da ist. Hier, schau mal. Du bist in der Videoconference.
So I just want to underscore the point that Bernadette made about really how useful it was to have. You might say, well, so what? So you've got students talking to one another. But they're really quite different students. They have quite different... The Stanford students in this BodyWorks class were primarily students from HumBio, people thinking about going on a medical careers, a number of kind of engineers. There were like one or two, and you can see here's one of them, a master's student in comparative literature. But for the most part, they didn't have the theoretical framework of deconstruction and all of the various other kinds of... Many of them had not heard of Deleuze and Guattari at all. Zizek, what's that? And Bernadette and her group, that's the flavor of the month there always. And so it's a very interesting wake-up call and a clash between different kinds of cultures and different ways of looking at things that really enhanced, I think, the intellectual content of the course for the Stanford students. And I gather it had a similar effect for the Buffalo students.
Oh yes, absolutely. And of course, the difference was also that my seminar was only a graduate seminar, and in the future I would actually like to, to open this up and make it undergraduate and graduate. And Tim's class was much bigger, and he had graduates and undergraduates. So my students were basically, it's true, more theoretical, but they were also not so used to a to a day-to-day cyber culture in a way that, of course, people at Stanford are, where, as Tim always said, everybody's walking around with at least one computer under his arm or her. So anyway, I mean, here, of course, the situation is a little different, although I think the real difference here was really the age and the theoretical background of the students. But it was an extreme enrichment, and if I now encounter my students, they still talk about it. And by the way, Buffalo University got ranked 11th Wired university in the country because of this course. So this is also extremely important to the university here, to having used this. And when I arrived here, I can tell you it was really hard to get these things going. Not only was I almost 9 months pregnant, but I had to really convince people that I wanted to do that as a newcomer to this whole place. And it turned out the success story of last year, I guess. And And people are now considering using it for other, for other courses, other collaborations. And I think the cool thing about this is that it's cheap. I mean, once you have the software, you just can get going with whoever you want to be linked with. And that's, for example, for somebody like me who actually studied and has still a lot of relations with European universities, in the future that would be, I guess, very convenient, because we don't have to fly over the whole ocean in order to be talking about certain things. And it does make a big difference if you can see me talk about things, or if we have to email each other or talk on the phone, obviously. Although, of course, the quality here is a little less good than a MTV presentation or so. But I think it's also kind of stylish that we have this slight delay, and we once even called it Kandinsky universe when actually Tom Mitchell was with us. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the day that I can just use my PowerBook, plug it in, and there's actually, Jim Whitlock just told me here, our technician, that there's this new device. It's like, I don't know, 10 centimeters big or so, and it's like, it has everything that you need for video conferencing. So, and it costs less than $400, he said. I don't know, how do you call this thing? A Via Video.
Excellent.
So, anyway, I mean, once you have these kind of tools, you're really, I guess, out there, and then can be linked with anybody you wish to.
Great. Well, thank you, Bernadette, for taking time out and bringing Alexander in the cold weather to into campus to beam into Stanford, and we'll be seeing more of you soon.
It was an experience. Okay, see you. Bye-bye.
So I want to, with that, what I'd like to do is to show you one last set of tools that we're using. I mentioned that that one of the kinds of things that I'm interested in doing is not only just sort of linking up people to talk about stuff, but that we actually have tools for deep searching of content. This course that I'm currently teaching, Science and High Technology in the Silicon Valley, is a project that I started many years ago, actually before the internet, after I first got to Stanford. And what I wanted to do was to build a multimedia database documenting the history of Silicon Valley in its own medium. We worked together with Stanford University Libraries, a group of people in Stanford Libraries that were building software called academic software development. We built a web browser and authoring system before the web, and then Netscape came out, put us out of business, and it worked on the Stanford University Network. But that was the beginning of a project that's called Silicon Base, and it has gone on in various other dimensions since that time. And one of the kinds of things that I always wanted to do with it was to build it to the point where you could actually search not only the text, but also the video and the content of the text and the content of the videos. There are new tools now becoming available for doing that, and Semio is one of these. Semio is a product that is produced actually here locally, but the founder of the company is a man named Jacques Vogel, who's from Paris. He's actually a semiotician, believe it or not. And he has devised a method for linking the internal contents of documents based on probabilistic distributions of the appearance of concepts within a database. So the way this works is that we have all of our texts, and there are texts in a variety of different forms. Some of them are in old formats of rich text files, RTF. Some of them are HTML files. Some of them are PDF files. And they're out there in all these different kinds of formats, but we have them on a couple of different servers. And we point this tool Semio to the thing, and we set it up in a way that it generates a document map based on the internal contents of the documents. It's not based on a set of terminologies, a set of indices or thesauruses that we use and point at that and say, like, give us these connections. It builds its own internal connections based on the contents of the documents that you pointed at. So, you can see that this allows you to explore a variety of different kinds of connections. It shows you the strength of connections between different types of ties. I could do a search, for example, on somebody like Doug Engelbart and submit that, and up comes Doug Engelbart with all the texts that are in the database, and it gives you the context. Let's go to this one. There's the context of the document, which the name Engelbart appears. I can click on the document, get the whole document. When we start using a new formatting procedure, XML documents, we'll be able to tag right down to the paragraph level and pull up all sorts of interesting connections that way as well. So you can see that this is an extremely powerful tool for allowing students not to be, and researchers not to be restricted to just what the course contents are, the things that we have up in the syllabus that they can search, but an entire database of other texts, including archival documents, so that we make no distinction whatsoever between the archive and published literature, and you can also point it to things that are not within our own specific web space, but other web environments as well, and that creates an amazing resource for constructing new arguments in this field. This is the kind of tools that are needed in order to navigate cyberspace, to make this kind of these kinds of new technologies that are becoming available to us, to make them actually useful for scholarship as well as for teaching. Not just put them up there for broadcast, but to put them up there in ways that we can access them in a format that can be researched and dragged into whatever kind of new document that you're working on. So that's one thing. It has another view, which is a hierarchy view, which organizes the world in terms of a tree structure. I won't show you that in the interest of time, but would encourage you to do that. You can set this thing at lower levels of resolution. I think it'll probably take a while for it to redo that. And when you do that, you can explore. You can like click on these different little worlds that you see there and go around and see the way it looks at the kinds of relations that it finds in the documents, the connections between different sorts of concepts, which is itself very suggestive. You can tweak the parameters so as to be able to adjust it to your own interests. And you could even add in, if you are a computer scientist, for example, and you're interested in computer history, you could pull in the thesaurus from the journal, some mathematics and computer science or various kinds of journals that would allow you then to hook that thesaurus together with your own to create a richer set of searching categories, and in other words, highly personalized searching tools for the internal contents of documents. Another type of thing then finally is, as I mentioned, the Silicon Valley is the center of the universe, as you can see. Is a video. I won't try that again where I crash my video here on you. But there are now tools. We've had a project going on for some time to interview leaders of Silicon Valley history, various kinds of people like John Hennessy, various other people have involved with building Silicon Valley. It's a project called Silicon Genesis that was funded very generously by a donor. And those videos now are have become the subject of a project done by a company that does voice recognition software called Dragonnet. Dragonnet's recently been bought up by another company, but they have developed new tools for searching internally the contents of a video. It breaks the video up into scene breaks with the assumption that anytime there's a change of content, a new idea comes in, you get a shift in the camera. This turns out to work pretty well. But then you'd like to be able to search the internal contents of the video on the audio track. And what this program does is it creates a transcription of the audio track, which is extremely accurate. And then you can do search terms on that will pull up the segments of the video that interest you. These are crucial kinds of tools for the sort of research projects that we're talking about here. As more and more material goes online that is video, and I believe that that is the future of this research environment, is more and more video. In fact, you see us using Flash here. There will soon be Flash video servers out there serving up our web pages. And as that happens, the kinds of things that we're going to need to do are to find searching tools like Simio does for text, but to search the internal contents of video. So you have to watch talking heads all day to get to the point that you want. And these are the kinds of things that are now just about to become available that we are integrating into this teaching environment at Stanford. So let me conclude here by just saying that maybe you've seen that there is a kind of trajectory here, and it's a kind of reverse trajectory of the one that that we normally hear about. Usually what happens is that people from the research community develop interesting new kinds of tools that are then trickled down into the teaching community. And actually what's happened in this case is that my participation through the very generous funding of the Stanford Learning Lab and Introduction to Humanities has introduced me to a whole bunch of new kinds of technologies, primarily for teaching, namely particularly the Panphora, the use of the forum for, and then this new technology of the IP video conferencing. And I have integrated those tools into the construction of a research environment. So it's gone quite the reverse of what's normal, from teaching to research this time instead of research to teaching. And I think there might be a lot of concerns and interest in discussing some of the issues about that, but I thank you for your attention.
There's probably time for just one or two questions, Tim, if you're willing.
Sure. I'm sorry for going so long. We had a little too many people in the... My view is that it absolutely has to. Maybe, I mean, as you can see, that we're already involving people who, like Tom Mitchell, who's from the Art Institute at Chicago, beams into this class. Doug Engelbart walks in off the street. You know, there's this kind of idea that there are no walls to this classroom. And there are people at Georgia Tech, the deans and provost of Georgia Tech have been observing this experiment that we've been doing, and they are very interested in creating what they're calling a trans university that would address some of these issues that you're talking about. They see this exactly the same thing that you've pointed to, that another thing that I'd point out here is I was on a commission a couple of years ago that looked at the use of the Stanford Network. And we wanted to find out, well, how heavily is the Stanford Network being used, and who are the people, particularly like the Stanford channel, or like the SITN courses. You know, how heavily is that being used? What are the times of day and everything? One of the things that we found out, which was to me just remarkable, was that the Stanford Network is most heavily used around 2 a.m. And you think, wow, that's interesting. Who's using it at 2 a.m.? And it turns out that the people that are using it are Stanford students. And they are looking at videos, they're looking at courses, they're looking at things that instead of actually going to a C++ programming class, they can watch it online. Or a course in bioinformatics. They can watch Russ Altman's course in bioinformatics and Doug Brutlag's course in bioinformatics online. And so this points to which was the basis for that grant that I received that you saw, that you mentioned from the President's office. To me, what it points out is that we don't have to organize courses in terms of the same time frames that we have been. Why couldn't people be taking courses for credit at 2 a.m.? And there are all kinds of ways that one could build in interactivity with face-to-face communication of the sort that you're seeing here, even into those kind of courses. So I think we're going to change the way that the university, so that we come together in face-to-face meetings for very specialized purposes, namely, for those really deep conversations that we want to have, and not just imparting information in the old style of the lecture. So I really believe that that's the wave of the future and what this technology enables.